Good music is good music. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter what label you give it. All that matters is that it's something that moves you. I've been playing jazz and classical music for years, and some of the most inspiring sounds I've ever heard were from my experiences of playing classical music in the orchestra. For this new album, I've drawn on some of these experiences to create a set of music for my trio that uses some of these great classical themes as a vehicle for jazz improv. Sometimes these compositions are adapted from small, intimate solo works that I've expanded for the trio. And sometimes I've turned to large orchestral works and boiled them down to their essence to give us an interesting framework to play over. I try to take inspiration wherever I can find it. This is some of the music that inspires me.
Welcome to Composer's Voice, Mark.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we just start off by just say your name and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Mark Wade. I'm a bass player and composer. Been here in New York City, working professionally for probably about the last 25, 30 years. I primarily play jazz and classical music. When it comes to my own projects as a composer, it's jazz. My group is a jazz piano trio, so piano, bass, drums, the standard configuration of a lot of groups, and that's the group that I write for primarily.
And what's the trio called?
The trio is the Mark Wade Trio. Really original name. You know?
Well, I feel like that's also kind of standard for jazz to do, right?
Yeah, that's the standard format for sure. Yeah.
So you do classical and jazz. What type of classical stuff do you do?
A freelancer here in town, so it's kind of whatever I get called for as it is for most of the time. But my main outlet for playing classical music these days is with the Bronx Opera.
How long have you been working for them?
Well, in some capacity, probably for about 15 years. When I started, I was playing just the orchestra concerts. A lot of times for the operas, there's just one bass. So in the beginning, when they would expand to like 2 or 3 or 4, I would get the call as a section player. But eventually, I ended up doing the opera performances, which is just one bass. And I've probably been doing that for about the last 8 or 9 years.
And what other classical gigs do you do?
I've played for a number of concerts for Yui Kitamura's Muse concert series, and a lot of one-offs here and there. I was not classically trained. I was an electric bass player. I was a self-taught electric bass player going into high school. Okay. Took not even a year's worth of lessons, probably about 6 months worth of lessons, and then auditioned for a jazz program at NYU. Got into the jazz program as an electric bass player. Started playing acoustic bass about halfway through college. Came out of college 2 years later, making a living playing the acoustic bass, and then bought a bow. And I was playing in just like community orchestras just to get my chops up, just to learn, just to get better at reading and play more in tune and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of a skill building contest, if you will, until I got a gig, and then I got another gig, and I kept practicing, and people kept giving me gigs, so then it became part of my professional practice. But I came to classical music absolutely through the back door.
Wow.
Yeah. I played for about 10 years in a reading orchestra at the 92nd Street Y. Every Sunday, you'd show up and you'd read some part of the repertoire. and then you throw it away, and next week you do something else. And so you get the part a week in advance, and you had a chance to practice it, and I had a lot of time on my hands back in those days. So I was always practicing that stuff. And it was a great way to see a ton of rep for someone who had not grown up in the rep and grown up in conservatory and all that kind of stuff. It was a crash course in a lot of things. And so that was like a really nice gig for me.
You've been playing jazz all along?
Yeah, so jazz was primarily something I started kind of going into college.
Okay.
So, while I'm doing all these classical things that I'm talking about, I'm still also practicing and learning and playing and into jazz music as well. That was how I started on the acoustic bass. Like I said, I went to New York University. I studied with the great Mike Richmond of Miles Davis fame et al. He's played with just about everybody. I won't drop all the names for him, but he's a heavy guy. He was, even more importantly for me, he was a great teacher. And he was someone who really understood someone like me who was coming from electric bass, just picking up the acoustic bass at that point in my life. Not something you would get at a lot of conservatories. They would expect you to already know that. So he was really the perfect guy for me because I was serious about learning. I was a real serious student. I just didn't have a lot of experience with it up to that point. So he was patient, but very motivating, very positive. Someone who really helped me make the switch from electric to acoustic. And I still play electric bass professionally as well. So that was a really important thing, really key for someone like me in my position. And I'm not the only person who could say that, I think, in that program at that time as well.
Tell us about the studio recording.
Yeah, so the new album, I'm really excited about this. So we recorded what really amounts to just about a double album's worth of material. It's a project that I've been working on actually since I finished my first record. First record came out in 2015. And I think not long after we got out of the studio, which would have been in 2014, I wrote the very first piece for this current project that we've just finished recording. So the new album is called New Stages. And it is a compilation of compositions that are all based off of and adapted from classical music for a jazz piano trio. So in some cases, I've taken large orchestral works and kind of boiled them down to their essence, if you will, and orchestrate it in such a way that it can be presented as kind of a newish piece of music as a jazz piano trio. And then sometimes I've taken solo works, like a solo piano work, two Chopin solo piano works that I expanded out for the trio and went that way. So it's across a large swath of genres from Bach all the way up into Gorecki. So very modern, and then to Baroque. And the goal was for me, the challenge for me that I took on as an arranger, as a composer, was to make all of these different pieces sound like jazz and sound like it was something that I wrote, that it would belong in a set of original music that I had written. Right. The thrust of the band has always been original music. All of my records, it's all original music. I have one or two arrangements of a standard in a couple instances, but the large thrust of the band has always been my writing. I'm really trying to go through these works, and I have the benefit of playing in the orchestra. I'm inside this music. And so when I adapt the Sibelius Violin Concerto, first movement, for a jazz piano trio, it isn't a random selection. It's because I was in the orchestra and I heard it and it moved me to tears. It was so beautiful. And I said, I don't know what I can do with this, but I have to do something. It means that much to me, I have to do it. And then you have the experience of playing in the section, in the orchestra, hearing the music this way, and then the recording and getting the score and really crawling through and say, what really hit me? I've really tried to, in all cases, pick music that it was meaningful to me personally in some way. Like, it wasn't just I liked it, I really liked it. It really hit me in such a way I couldn't let it go. And that's really the result of this project. I am trying to be very purposeful and very careful about what I'm taking, why I'm taking it, how we're using it, and then ultimately how we're presenting it.
Why don't you tell us some of the pieces?
Sure. So, like I said, it's a wide list of pieces, and certainly, I'm sure people tuning in will know that. Well, other jazz musicians have certainly done this before. There's no shortage of jazz musicians who have looked to the great masterworks of classical music for inspiration for their music. I'm trying to pick a wide variety and also maybe lesser known or lesser done things. So, the most quote-unquote straight-ahead thing that I've picked would be Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. Everybody knows it. And we did it as this kind of medium swing thing that sounds a little bit like Vince Guaraldi's trio from all the Peanut stuff, if people know that stuff. But so we have that on one end, and then I adapted the first movement of Gurecki's Third Symphony, which is a very different animal altogether. I've got our version of the Debussy Children's Corner Suite, 6 movements from the original. I took 4 of those 6 and turned it into our own version of the Children's Corner Suite. One is a feature for the piano, one is a feature for the drums, one is a feature for the bass, and the one at the end, the most famous movement, the Cakewalk movement, I combined with a Thelonious Monk tune. So that kind of thing. The Children's Corner Suite, Debussy's Children's Corner Suite, 6 different movements. Our adaptation on this record is an amalgam of a few of these things, but the third one of mine is actually I can't actually remember which movement it was of Debussy's, but one of the later ones had to do with the shepherd, the story of the shepherd. And so that was one that I adapted as a feature for me, for the double bass. There's one for piano, one for drums, one for me, and then one for all 3 of us at the end. It starts with sounding just like it could be any medium kind of jazz tune without piano, and I use this very haunting melody that struck me from that movement of Debussy's as like this constant kind of call that happens throughout. As the head, and I treat it just by reharmonizing it each time, so that you get the melody presented 3 times with 3 different sets of harmony underneath it. Duraflay Requiem. I took a number of movements from the Duraflay Requiem to make a suite of music. Sibelius Violin Concerto I mentioned. So, you know, and a couple solo pieces by Chopin. Two lesser known pieces. One was the D minor prelude, off the top of my head, I think it's number 24 in D minor, called The Storm. The concept behind The Storm, I remember hearing, this was one of those moments where I was in the car listening to the radio, and this came on, and it was a Chopin work that I was not familiar with. And that Chopin was my entryway into classical music. So at one time I listened to, you know, all the nocturnes, all the this, all of that. And you know, and I had set it aside for a little while, and this came on the radio, and I knew this wasn't one that I knew, and I loved it. And I know I'm naturally drawn to that music, but I thought, this is great. And I think I actually pulled over the car and wrote down, because they announced at the end what it was. I was waiting for it, and I wrote it down, and I said, okay, I got to look this up later. And one of the joys of Chopin's music for me is, you know, that sense of romanticism that is that push and pull of tempo and of melody, of how the time will stretch. And I thought, well, you know, this is a wonderful piece and whatnot. Like, but how are we going to do this, right? Because we can't quite do it this way. If we're going to do it, how can I represent those ideas and be faithful to the idea of this without literally reproducing this? And that's a dilemma I've gone through with this whole project. And so I said, well, do we play it in time, or do we play it out of time? Maybe we could play it completely free. And so when I wrote through a version that was completely free, it was free the whole time, and then I wrote out a version. I'm like, well, what would it sound like if we played it like a Brad Meldau CD and put it in time straight eighth, and so I thought, like, what if we did like a Brad Meldau thing and we made it a straight eighth kind of feel, and going for this kind of like late 90s Brad Meldau thing that I had in my head when I heard it. And so then I said, how about we do both? So that was really how I came up with this idea of lots of freedom at times, and at the end, this real driving beat that gives I think, a certain gravitas, you know, and a certain, you know, seriousness to the music, and it helps ground both ideas. So I split the two, did two separate ideas, and that's how I ended up with The Storm.
have. So you've had this trio for how long?
So this trio has started. Our first gig was 2013. So we're coming up almost on 13 years that I've kept the band together.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
I've been putting a lot of effort into my trio these days, well, all along really, and it keeping a band together for that long does require a lot of attention. Just like any living thing, you got to feed it to keep it alive, and that means writing music, finding work, playing opportunities, and recording, getting it out there. And I've been very fortunate as someone who hasn't had a lot of things behind me. I've been mostly independent up until recently. That I've been able to get my name out there and get it cast a wider net and that's led to better opportunities for me just in general for my career.
Is it the same three guys?
It has been the same three guys. Tim Harrison is the piano player, and Scott Newman is the drummer. We just got out of the studio last year, May of 2025, and that is our fourth studio recording that we've done thus far.
Fabulous.
So yeah. I would say that just that I'm really excited to have this music finally hit the airwaves here at the end of March here, March 2026. New stages, Dot Time Records. For anybody interested or watching, you can always go to my social media. I'm very findable online. I'll be making plenty of noise about those things as they approach.
All right, thank you so much for coming.
Man, it's my pleasure to be here, man. It's great to talk to you, man.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.